The Carpenter and the Cradle, a History Weaver Adventure, Book 1, by Connie Worden. Read by the author. Chapter 13. Coe climbed out of the vehicle. The spot was as good a drop-off point as any. It wasn't a long walk from here. He said a quick thank you and gave a nod and a wave and set off. The vehicle didn't move off immediately, and he could almost sense the man's curious eyes following him for a few moments. But eventually, he heard the vehicle move away, and Coe knew he was alone and safe. For now. Cora looked up at the friendly, "Hello!" She'd seen the girl once before. What was her name again? It was the name of a month of the year. Hope had remembered it when they were telling Graham about the neighbors they had met. It was June. That was it. "Hi," Coral answered in the same friendly tone and offered a smile. "It's June, isn't it?" "That's right, and you're Coral, right?" "Good memory. Yep, I'm Coral." June had a paper plate extended in her right hand. "My little sister baked some cookies to welcome you to the neighborhood. We're your nearest neighbors. I wish I could say I'd baked them myself, but, well, to be honest, you may be happy I can't say that," June laughed. "I'm not much of a baker. They wouldn't be likely to be edible if I'd baked them, but my little sister, we call her Gussie, she likes to do it, and she's pretty good, too. I tried a few of these chocolate chip cookies from this batch, and there's nothing wrong with these, believe me." "Gussie," Coral said, latching onto one factoid from the stream of speech issuing from June's mouth. "Is that short for something?" "It's short for August." "Oh, interesting. Are you all months of the year?" "We are. All except my dad. The rest of us are all girls, or women, female, I mean. My dad is very outnumbered in our family. My mum is April, my grandma, my dad's mum, is May, and my parents wanted to name their oldest daughter after her. There are 4 girls in my family, by the way, so they named my oldest sister Maylia. We call her Maylie for short. But after they'd done that, my mum thought it would be fun when she learned she was having twins to name them June and July if they ended up both being girls, which we did end up being, obviously. And then, when Gussie came into the picture unexpectedly, they realized they had no choice but to name her August or she'd be left out of the pattern." June was a little breathless after this explanation. "I like it. How fun. Your parents must have a sense of humor." "I guess so. At our expense, anyway. I don't always love having to explain the name thing, but I kind of like our names. They're unique." Coral nodded and then remembered her manners. "Thank you for the cookies," she said, taking them from June's hand. "I'll take them to my mom, and she'll want to thank you, too. Do you want to come and see what we've done on the barn house so far?" "Sure," June agreed happily. "Mom, here's June from down the road, I think. You're our nearest neighbor. I guess you must be from down the road." June nodded and followed Coral into the barn where Caroline Lyons was on her hands and knees, with her back to June and Coral, sanding the corners of the floor where the electric sander couldn't get to it. Caroline stood up slowly and dusted off her knees. "Hi, June. Thank you for coming over to see us. I've been meaning to stop into your place and introduce myself to your family, but it's just been so frantic. We're making the most of every moment of daylight that we can these days, trying to get this place habitable before the snow flies. You must be the Beaver Row Books people then, right?" "Yep, that's us." "Well, nice to meet you. I was glad to hear you'd stop by the other day to meet Coral, and now I'm glad I get to meet you. Please let your family know they're also free to stop by any time. We'll give them the grand guided tour." "Thanks," June said. "And she brought us cookies, Mum. Her little sister Gussie baked them. You'll have to hear the story of their names. They're all named after months in their family, at least the girls. I don't know your dad's name." "My dad is Paul Eagles. We're Eagles. All of our names are kind of unusual, I guess, except for Paul, but Eagles is different too, isn't it?" "And we're the Lions," Caroline said, extending a hand for June to shake. "How funny. We have a regular zoo going on in the neighborhood. We've got the Eagles and the Lions so far." June giggled politely. "You know, Coral, those cookies look gorgeous. I think it's time we stop for a little tea break. Or at least an iced tea and cookie break. Maybe June can join us and she can meet the rest of us Lions." "I'd love to," June said cheerfully, thinking, "Mission accomplished. This much of it, anyways." "Hope! Rex! Will!" Caroline Lyons called up into the loft of the barn where the rest of Coral's family were obviously at work, from the sounds of hammering and sawing going on. The 3 descended the ladder, propped against the barn wall from the opening of the loft, and June saw 2 sandy-haired young men and a teenage girl coming down. The first, a brother, appeared to be about 20 or 21. Then came a blonde girl, Hope, she supposed, who looked about 18 or 19. The younger boy looked slightly older than Coral. He may have been 17, though he looked a little younger. But girls tended to mature faster in their teens, June told herself. June decided he was probably Coral's older brother. And Coral, she had already decided, must be just about her own age, 15. So, Rex is oldest, then this is Hope, and Wilson is next. Coral is the baby of the family, Coral's mom introduced. June smiled in acknowledgement around the circle. I'm June, she said when Caroline finished the introductions. And you'll have to hear the names of the rest of her family. They're all months, in order, except her dad, Coral put in. June repressed the sigh that often wanted to escape when she had to explain her family's unorthodox names, and she repeated the story of her family's names all over again for the other 4. The boys laughed, and Hope smiled with her mouth, but not her eyes. June wasn't sure she liked Hope. Coral, though naturally gorgeous with her long tanned limbs and long wavy sun-lightened honey-colored hair and unusual green hazel eyes, seemed very down-to-earth and likable. June thought they would probably end up being good friends. She couldn't wait for Coral to meet July and Fern. The 4 of them might be in the same grade at school, and they could hang around together every lunch hour. It would be so nice to have a near neighbor as a friend, too, seeing Fern lived too far away to just pop over to her house any old time. Thinking of Fern brought Georgie to mind, and June was reminded that the main reason she had come calling on her new neighbors was to fish for information as to what they had made of Georgie's unexplained presence on the day of Coral's emergency. She scratched around in her brain for a way to bring up the subject, but for the life of her, none would come to her. She hadn't seen her way any farther than getting Gussie to bake cookies to give to her new neighbors. Caroline was showing June the work they'd done on the cherry barn, while June mulled over any possibilities for raising the topic of Georgie. Without actually raising the topic of Georgie, that is. Finally, as they were settling down under the shade of the tall, wind-gnarled firs that bordered the cherry land, and preparing to make the most of Gussie's cookies and Caroline's home-brewed iced tea, June finally thought of something. It may be a long shot, but it was worth a try. She asked the assembled group, So, have any of you had any adventures since coming to Beaver Row? Moving here has been a bit of an adventure, Hope said, but there was sarcasm in her voice. Caroline ignored her older daughter's comment and said, Well, Coral had an adventure the other day, didn't you, Cor? Not a nice one, Coral agreed, nodding. But it could have been worse, I guess, 'cause I'm still here. Coral's allergic to bees. Her throat swells closed if she gets stung and she can't breathe. That kind of allergic, her mom put in. And she got stung the other day when she was all alone, out exploring in the woods, and she had somehow taken her EpiPen out of her backpack. She always has an EpiPen on her when she's anywhere where she could be stung by a bee, but for some reason she'd taken it out of her backpack. By the way, Cor, did you find it? Yeah, it was in my other backpack. I just forgot to transfer it. So, what happened? How did you get out of that one alive? June asked. Inwardly, she was gleeful. They were bound to say something about Georgie now. Well, it was super strange, actually, Coral said, frowning. Do you happen to know a girl who maybe lives around here? She looks about my age, 15. She has curly brown hair, sort of short or shoulder length. I didn't notice too much else about her because, I was kind of busy, dying. June frowned back. Now what should she say? She decided on, that could describe a few girls in Beaver Row, I guess. In the woods near here, maybe it was someone out hiking. Oh yeah, could be, Coral nodded. But what about her? What happened? June prompted. Well, I started to panic. Actually, when I couldn't find my EpiPen, I screamed as best I could, just out of instinct, not because I thought anyone might hear me, but it was just sort of a natural reaction. I wasn't running out of air just yet, so I was still able to scream. Anyway, almost immediately this girl came out of nowhere, it seemed, and she ran to find my family. And now that I think about it, how did she know they were my family, and where to find them? June shrugged and came up with her reply on the spur of the moment, feeling quite clever as she answered, Maybe she is someone local. She must have known where the old cherry barn is and knew that people were moving in. If she lives around here, she'd probably know all that. In a place the size of Beaver Row, everyone knows everything about everyone, about as quick as it happens. Then June's conscience began pricking. Were her evasive answers actually lying? She stuffed back the thought as soon as it occurred to her. Now was not the time for a moral debate. She just had to do the best she could in the moment. And doing her best meant saying what she could to allay any suspicions of the Lyons family. Then a frightening thought jumped into her head. What if, when the Lyons family met Lady Cromarty, or the Eagles, June's family, ended up telling the Lyons about Georgie's accident and her stay with Lady Cromarty? If they described her at all, the Lyons would surely recognize the description of her, and then the cat would be out of the bag, on several different levels. First, they'd report that Georgie was still around, or at least she'd still been around as of the day of Coral's beasting. Then, they'd also wonder why June hadn't instantly realized from their description that the girl was Georgie. The natural conclusion would be the truth, that June already knew Georgie was still in the area but was shielding her and covering up for her. June went hot and cold by turns as the idea occurred to her. All the while she smiled and nodded at whatever Caroline was saying. "Calm down," she told herself strictly. "Even if the Lyons do hear about Georgie from my parents or Lady Cromarty, they might not get a description of her, or they may not figure out that it's the same girl from that description, and it's probably a far cry, even from that, to thinking that they'll instantly know that I was trying to cover her tracks. After all, why would I immediately think from the description of someone with curly brown hair that it had to be Georgie? You're being ridiculous, silly." While this inner monologue was running through June's head and she was nodding and smiling at Caroline Lyons, Caroline was busy saying, "But the strangest thing about this girl was her vanishing into thin air. I mean, I suppose she didn't, really. She probably just walked off, but she must have left at the time I was injecting Coral. Coral had passed out at that point. You would think any self-respecting Good Samaritan like this girl would want to see how the story turned out. Of course, none of us noticed her leave. We were trying to save Coral's life at the moment, but it was just so odd. We looked up to thank her for rescuing Coral, and the girl was gone." "Very odd," June muttered, still nodding and smiling, and now half frowning to try match the mood of what she was saying. She was feeling the pressure of the conversation while her thoughts were running. She was trying not to lie, while at the same time wondering what she could do to help Georgie. Plus, she wondered if Georgie would get discovered through her Good Samaritan gesture. Then she worried that she, June, might end up in trouble out of it all too. Now she scrambled for a subject changer. Fortunately, the cherry barn was always good conversation fodder. She thought of something to ask Caroline about the renovation, and breathed a sigh of relief when the topic shifted back to the cherry barn recovery project.